They never told me which language to present in, so I almost started my presentation in Cheyenne. They probably wouldn't get too far here. I'd like to thank the organizers for this conference. Mainly Anae Slaughter, the one who just left here, and Laura Benavides. I hope I pronounced her last name right. They were already working last night when I got here, and it was, it's such a joy to see somebody working so hard. That was supposed to be a joke, but I guess it didn't get across. I hate to always have to explain my jokes. And I'd also like to thank you, the audience, for coming and making this a success, and the presenters too. So it's a lot of work that goes into this. I'm retired, but I'm retired like Ine is. We still work at the same time. So, why am I the keynote speaker? Well, I'm substituting for Deborah Holland, who was the original invitee to be the speaker. She just couldn't make it because of her time constraints. So I'm here. I'm also substituting for a guy named Dr. Richard Littlebear. I'm not the real Dr. Littlebear, but I'm substituting for him. He had to cancel at the last minute, too. And he would have been the ultimate choice. He would have been a choice because he's tall, dark, handsome, sophisticated, suave. So you have to settle for me. He's so handsome also that you would have mistaken him for Attorney Gerald Hill, who's also a member of the ILI board. He's much more handsome than this poor substitute right here. But the organizers really couldn't do anything, so you're really stuck with me. I'll do my best to perform up to Dr. Littlebear's standards, if he has any. And even aspire to the higher standards of the Indigenous Language Institute. Over time, I've learned that it's always advantageous to start a session with a relevant joke. I tried already, didn't work, so I'll try it again. And this is kind of relevant to what Pat's going to be doing. It has to do with a film that was being made in Hollywood with cowboys and Indians, so forth. But one part of that film was when they had a group of Native American warriors all riding bareback, and they had to ride up to a cliff because their cameras were down there, and they were going to record that. And one of the director said, "I want one of you." It was all Native American warriors riding bareback. Said, "I want one of you to say, when you come up to the cliff, to say stop. But I want you to say it in your own language." And there were about 30 of them, he tried to get somebody to speak stop in Cheyenne. I mean, in their own language, and none of them spoke their own languages. They had lost their language. But there was one enterprising actor. He came up with the idea, and he talked to the director and said, "I got the solution." So they conferred, and they finally agreed on it. And all the actors on horseback went back to where their spot was, and then there was a signal, and they all came riding up to the cliff. And the person who was acting as the chief, in his best chief voice, said, "Estiopi." Let that sink in for a while. He said, "Estiopi." Analyze it a little bit. I don't want to have to explain my jokes all the way through. All he was doing was translating stop into what sounded like a Native American language, Estiopi. No more jokes. I get tired of explaining them. But there's a really good movie coming out. I think it already came out this week. It has to do with Killers of the August, or the Flower Moon. I can't remember. It's got a Native American from Montana as one of the leading roles. So you better go see it. A story about Native American actors illustrates the state of our languages. They are slowly coming into a decline, and that is terrible. I think these kind of gatherings we need to have more of these, because I'm so gratified that there's a full room here. Usually, when I came back to the reservation in Montana, I would call meetings, and there would only be 3 or 4 of them come to the meetings that had to do with the language. And every time I called the meeting, there still would be 3 people, but they would be different people. So it was a continuous tug of war to get people to come. Now, after I left, and it wasn't because of me, it was because of the urgency of our language loss. It was, people started coming. At one of the last meetings, we had 57 people there. That to us is a large group. So those are the kind of things that we need to be doing. We need to interact, just as Ine said, to network. I think is what her language is. So we can learn from each other. So we can tell each other, this is what we're doing. These are the innovations we're doing. We're starting with the youth. We're starting with the elders. We're just anything that will help, because we're all in the same thing together. When I started out speaking in Cheyenne because that's my original language, and I am in love with my language. So it's really important that we do this, because once our languages are lost, everything else starts to slowly crumble and disappear. We don't want that. So what do we need to do? We need to do a lot of things. And for some of you, I might be repeating this information, but it doesn't hurt to hear it more often. Oh, before I forget, I want you all to clap your hands, do whatever, Lulu, because we have a new doctorate in the office, among us. Rainey, Growing Thunder, just earned her doctorate. Can you stand up, Rainey? That's quite an accomplishment. She was telling me all the travails we went through and going and getting our doctorates. This is a new experience for a lot of Native Americans. I said, all right, if there's any one of you who want to go through a doctoral program, go ask Rainey. She has all the answers now. But I feel so proud of her. And that's how come I interrupted this so. What needs to be done? A lot of things need to be done. We've got to applaud those who revive their languages into daily use. And there are some of them. Among the I never can pronounce this right, Wampanoag tribe was Jesse Littlebear, who revived the language using documents that dealt with monetary exchanges. And there was nobody had spoken that language for 200 years before that. She did that through reading the Bible, getting the words from the Bible, and now it's supposedly in everyday use. And it takes a lot of effort to do that. Another person is called Eliezer ben Yehuda, who revived the Hebrew language until it's now a working everyday language. And that was after a dormancy of that language for 2,000 years. And I suppose there was a lot of written stuff there, but that's what Yehuda did, and he's dedicated his life to it. So if it comes to that, we're going to have people doing that. I recently returned from a language conference called Pulima down in Darwin, Australia. And one group of presenters were people from the Maori land. And they presented together with non-Maoris, mainly white people. And in one of their presentations, they talked about the language and how it came about and what the language is doing. And one of the things that stands out for me was that the Maori language was bringing the white people and the Maori people together. And that was very evident in the presentation they made. They had what was called, they have a dance, maybe you've all seen it. It's called the haka, and it's really impressive. They all did that. That was so good. And it was a mixture of old people, young kids, and they really get into that, that kind of I call it a dance. I don't think it's a dance, but it's really a powerful gesture for the language. So there are probably a lot more languages that have been revived. But it just proves that reviving a language can be done. It just takes dedication, commitment, and a whole lot of sacrifice. And you gotta be able to do that on your own, because most college curricula don't have Sacrifice 101, Bonehead Dedication, 000, those kind of things. It's got to come from the heart. You gotta totally believe it, in it, and it's got to come from the heart, and it's got to be constant. There are people who will say, well, it doesn't apply anymore. No, it does apply. One of the things I've done is gone back to read a lot of stuff about these people who revived the languages. And that's what you got to do, because you learn something from that. Learn how to save the language, and how long it takes to do that. And how are you going to save it? Are you going to save it orally or just writing? No, you got to make those kind of decisions. Next, we need homegrown linguists. Linguists are okay. You can pet them from a long way away. I've had trouble with linguists ever since I started working with my language. The linguists that came, I would go and ask them, can you help me with this? Because I didn't know anything about it. I was a federal programs officer. And that was the extent of what I knew. So I would go over and ask him. There was a linguist right in the community, and I would go and ask him, can you help me with this? I don't know anything about it. And he would say, I probably know even less than you, because I wasn't trained that way. And after about 4 or 5 times of asking him to help me with teaching, with setting up curricula, setting up lesson plans, I finally said, oh, if you can't help me, what the hell good are you? And later he started thinking, well, maybe I better make this more make my knowledge of linguistics be more practical. And the last time I ever heard from him was, I'm a promoter of TPR, Total Physical Response. And last time I heard from him, he said, it really does work. And I said, what have I been saying for the last 12 years? It really does work. Until he could experience it himself, he really knew. Now, he's probably not using linguistics anymore, but at least now he knows how to apply that. The linguists who came to us were usually ethnographers who weren't literally trained as linguists. They learned how to write stuff and develop their own writing systems. But most of the people who came were missionaries, and they hit upon the idea that if we can learn the language, we can learn how to write it, develop a writing system, we can convert these people to our religion. So it was actually a colonial instrument for conquering the people. So now that's the bad part. The good part is that they developed a lot of dictionaries. And now that we're losing our languages, in those dictionaries are treasures of our own words. And those really come in handy, especially if you're into coining new words, coining new phrases. Those really come in handy, because even though these words may have gone obsolete, they are still applicable. And that's what it takes a language. A language has to do that. It has to self-replenish. Take English, for instance. English is really a powerful language because it ingests every other thing, every other word that applies to it to come on. Like, take the word web. Most of us immediately have a picture of a spider with all the webs. But for the younger generation, it means worldwide communication. It means worldwide technology. The word web has taken on a different significance. And that's what I mean by the power of the English language. Even though the English language is doing that, I still find that English language very meaningful. It is now the language of commerce, diplomacy, and a lot of other things that we never thought a language could do. So, regardless of how the language came into our societies, we got to be thankful, and we still got to use it. I always say that I know 2 languages, Cheyenne and English. And they are both complementary. They are both useful because English permits me to make a living in this present-day society. It permits me to provide for my family. Cheyenne, my original language, has a lot. I get a lot of help from that because of it fulfills the spiritual aspects of my life. I can go and I can deal with any spiritual issue, any trauma, and with two languages, because I have really good vocabulary in both languages. I can talk about things on a horizontal basis or in a deep basis in 2 languages. And those help me quite a bit because I am an alcoholic. And it really helps to be able to deal with issues, trauma that comes along in my life. To be able to deal with issues in 2 different languages. So, and I'm not afraid to say I'm an alcoholic. I've often thought that treatment, I never went to treatment, I just quit all of a sudden. Had some kind of an epiphany. And I often felt that I wish more people would get into that kind of a thinking frame, because it makes people salvageable, and it's the epiphany is a very good experience. I've often thought that people who are in treatment centers, there should be a component that teaches them their language. Now, because of the length of treatment, sometimes it's too short, but at least an introduction of that may change people's minds or activities. Now, I didn't have that, but I already knew I had the language itself. So, another need, we need to have our trained teachers. We need trained teachers who know about curriculum development, lesson plan development, the operation of schools, how to treat students at each level. Because often our teachers are picked just because they are fluent in the language. And when you do that, you're preparing a wholesale group of people for failure. And consequently, that reflects on the programs. And people start saying, well, they never work. But we got to prepare our teachers for being able to deal with the school. So, I just lost my place here. Most of the teachers are older. They have never had a chance to go to college, for instance. They have never had a chance to teach the language. They were just picked because they were fluent. And that doesn't work. We got to be able to train them, at least a modicum of training of some kind. Most of us who are sitting here probably already have that kind of training, but we got to have our people. And fluency is great. Fluency is good, but there's got to be more to that. Just being fluent isn't going to translate that knowledge to a student. It's not. It takes effort, and we got to be able to do that. Otherwise, we're just leading those people and the organization into failure. And we have enough traditions of failure without adding another one. When you pick only fluent people, if you could compare it this way, if all of a sudden a school lost its English teacher, and they looked around and said, well, what can we do? We don't have an English teacher and school is starting. And you saw a white guy walking down the street and you ran out there and said, hey, do you know how to speak English? And they'd say, yeah, I sure do. And you said, come on in, you can teach our English. And he comes in and doesn't know a thing about what he's going to talk about. That's how we treat our teachers, often. And that, again, leads to failure. So, I know I put it in funny terms, but that's what we try to do when you just pick people on fluency. Fluency isn't bad. I'm not putting it in a negative light. I enjoy my fluency in my own language. But there's got to be more to that. And your family experience should be able to tell you that. We prepare people for failure. The other thing is, I've heard, and people have told me that whenever I go for a job, the interview is in English. There's no indication of the Cheyenne as part of the interviewing process. There's no indigenous language involved. So why should we learn our language? Because it doesn't do us any good on a practical basis. Actually, there are many reasons for that. One of them has to do with a child's age. A child's first language is usually critical to what kind of identity they're going to have. Is it going to be positive, or is it always going to be striving for something else? Once you set somebody with a good self-concept, and that's what teaching them their own language does. Their own self-concept becomes more positive. I'm really glad I learned my language without interruption until I was fairly fluent, because I didn't have any interference from another language. I intellectually and educationally, I had a relatively straight line to get to the concept of being a positive person, and that's really important. It's also very critical to their identity, and those are the kind of things that we need to bolster, because this world that we live in is racist. It is racist. And much of that is put in terms of in the English language. And we got to be able to withstand that. So once you start teaching people their own language, keep it going. Because I hate to talk about racism, but it's evident, especially in Montana. I'll criticize my own state. It still has a frontier attitude towards Native Americans. And it's really hard to overcome. We don't need to overcome their racism. We just need to develop a positive self-concept. And that will go a long ways to helping you overcome that racism. Socially, when the language is not maintained, important links are lost, are severed between the family and sometimes to the community itself, because there's no common connection, because the kids don't know the language. And that's really difficult to come back and instill that positive concept in people. Intellectually, students need uninterrupted intellectual development. When students who are not fluent in English switch to using English only, they are functioning at an intellectual level below their age. Interrupting intellectual development in this manner is likely to result in academic failure. However, when parents and children speak with the language they know best with one another, they are both working at their actual level of intellectual maturity. You don't get lost because people are speaking their languages better than you. How much time do I have left? I never started my 2 hours? Oh. Okay. Students who learn English and continue to develop their native language have a higher academic achievement in later years than do students who learn English at the expense of their first language. It's a mouthful, but that's what. If you fall behind in your first language, you're going to stay behind all the time. And this came from a source that was put together by the National Center for Bilingual Education way back in 1991. So all of this material has been out there ever since, and it's still relevant today. And that's the other thing we need to do, is to research our sources. In closing, I would like to read to you a piece of expressive writing about language loss. But first, let me add this. That we are teaching our children and our people to speak, read, and write their native languages. We are teaching them a dead-end skill, because we are also not developing literature that will sustain their language skills. Plays, novels, poems, essays, critiques of dramatic productions are not being written by our speakers. And often what is produced by our speakers is produced in English. When I write, for instance, I tried to change that order. When I write, I first write it in my Cheyenne language, and then I translate it into English. Because both, if you have enough of a vocabulary, both can express the same thing. It's eloquently. And what I'm going to read to you is, I will only read the English part. I'm going to betray all the things that I've said. Because how many Cheyennes are in the building? 2 of us. So we have a big audience of 2 people in Cheyenne language. No, I'll just read it in the common language that we all understand. Where did I hide it? Oh. What happens when our languages are no more? What will happen when no tribes speak their languages anymore? There will be nobody to tell ancient stories to young children. There will be nobody to tell funny stories. There will be nobody to tell dirty jokes in Cheyenne, and there are a lot of them. There will be nobody telling you how the world was made. Because the ethics that makes a person a Native American will be gone. There will be nobody to tell you how the world was made. When the languages disappear, there will be make-believe Native American. They will be pretending to be Native Americans. They will look like Native Americans, but they will no longer be Native Americans. Oh, they will still go teepee creeping. That's a favorite pastime of a lot of people. They will still dance like Native Americans. They will still lulu like Native Americans. They will still hold giveaways like Native Americans. They will still go on fasting treks, journeys like Native Americans. They will still laugh at commodity jokes. They will still carry home leftover food in plastic bags. It used to be lard cans. They will still dress and dance regalia, but even when they wear them, the regalia will be empty. Their bells will have no true sounds. Those people will be empty. They will be hollow people. They will be like the empty trees with only the bark still standing. They will be like empty husks of corn. And I know what I'm writing is harsh, but it will be even harsher when our own languages are wiped away. When our languages are gone, there will be an oppressive and lowly silence throughout the whole universe. And at the end of time, when nobody speaks our languages anymore, it will be like this. There will no longer be any true Native American. They will no longer be Native Americans. Because they will have lost the one important aspect that makes them Native American, being able to speak your tribal language. And Nahan, thank you for listening to me. I learned one thing, don't tell jokes anymore. It's always a learning experience.